And we're following major breaking news right now in the NFL. Saints head coach Sean Payton stepping down per multiple reports. He had been with the Saints since 2006, but just in the past couple days over the weekend, Sean Payton's status became a big question. Saints owner Gail Benson confirmed Monday that the team was in the dark on his plans. Apparently, Sean Payton had not really been answering a lot of phone calls, went dark on several people close to the organization. Well, now they know their coach since 2006 is officially leaving the team. Sean Payton, now 58 years old. He has won 152 games, good for 21st amongst coaches in NFL history. He led the Saints to their one and only championship back in 2009 as Drew Brees and company beat Peyton Manning's Colts in Super Bowl 44. He was also the 2006 Coach of the Year. Let's welcome in NFL insider Jonathan Jones to talk about this massive news. Sean Payton stepping away from the Saints. It is not clear if that is stepping away from a year, if it is a retirement, but either way, he is not going to be with the Saints anymore, JJ.
No, he's not. He's not going to be there for the 2022 season, is probably the safest way of putting it. Sean Payton will not be an NFL head coach in the 2022 season. And there have been rumors and reports out there that he is wanted for some lucrative mega millions dollar deal with a TV network or two as a color analyst there. So all that is to be determined. But Sean Payton, I mean, this season with the various quarterbacks, right? I mean, four separate starting quarterbacks, from Jameis Winston to Ian Book and Trevor Siemian and Taysom Hill in between. You have Sean Payton, who did perhaps one of his greatest coaching jobs ever, getting the Saints to be in a position to make the playoffs there in the final week of the season. Of course, things didn't work out their way there at the end, but a really impressive coaching job nonetheless by Sean Payton, who, he's been there for a decade and a half in New Orleans, and he will be synonymous there with the Drew Brees era, the Peyton Brees era, as we just showed there in the graphic, bringing a Super Bowl there to New Orleans shortly after Hurricane Katrina. And so a legend, no question about it. The second longest tenured head coach in the NFL, right behind Bill Belichick and right in front of Mike Tomlin. And so it's not a huge surprise based off of what we learned over the weekend. Gail Benson's comments, as you referenced just a moment ago, Amanda, when the owner doesn't really know what the head coach is doing, very clearly something is up and afoot. But Sean Payton will not be roaming the sidelines in 2021, perhaps in a broadcast booth somewhere, and maybe he finds himself back on the sidelines in a year, 2 or 3 down the road. But for now, it is Sean Payton done in New Orleans.
JJ, you say not a surprise right now, given what we saw over the course of the weekend. But I'm curious, prior to that, whether it's just you speculating or maybe rumblings around the NFL, did anybody really see this coming?
I think some folks, there were some rumblings. And, the funny thing, Amanda, about this is it's always rumor season. And you hear something, and if you report it and you're wrong, of course, you're crazy. And so you hear, Sean Payton might be done in New Orleans. It's like, man, after the coaching job that he just did with where the New Orleans Saints may be, when you look at how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may be searching for a new quarterback here in a couple of months. Wow, that's a little surprising. So, it is slightly surprising, but when you understand all of the factors involved with Sean Payton, with how trying of a year this was, let's not forget, of course, how they began the season, having to go out to Dallas, having to play in Jacksonville against the Green Bay Packers. It's been a trying year. 4 different quarterbacks. Ian Book having to go out there in that primetime game with the COVID-19 issues in that quarterback room. So, again, a heck of a job done by Sean Payton this season.
JJ, I mean, you talked a little bit about his legacy there in New Orleans. I mean, when it comes to Sean Payton, the coach, we don't know his next plans. We just don't know at this point. But his legacy, what he means to the Saints, to the game of football, how good he is as a coach, just kind of expand on that.
Yeah, one of the best play callers, offensive play callers in the NFL. And I think that he didn't really always get credit for that because he had a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback there in Drew Brees, but I think that he really showed his mettle this past season, as I've referenced earlier. And when you talk about, this was a franchise that, quite frankly, was a laughingstock, right? I mean, we all remember the Saints fans with bags over their heads in the Superdome, and Sean Payton comes in there, a highly coveted coordinator and assistant coach, and he comes to New Orleans and, you know, quite literally turns the franchise around. He and Drew Brees, and he continued to find success in the year after Drew Brees. He found success when Drew Brees was injured these past couple of seasons, right? He goes 5-0 with Teddy Bridgewater, for example, and wins with Taysom Hill, and continued to reinvent himself as an offensive play caller and represented that city so well. Of course, in any sort of career recap, you have to discuss Bountygate and how he was suspended for a year and bounced back from that. There's even a major Hollywood picture that's going to be coming out about that. It's Kevin James as Sean Payton. Oh, curious, the casting there. But Sean Payton no doubt has a legacy. And if Sean Payton does decide to return to coaching, Amanda, what we're likely going to see, if it's not in New Orleans and if it's elsewhere, there's going to have to be some sort of draft pick compensation that's sent to the New Orleans Saints by whatever team is hiring Sean Payton. I don't think it's any secret that the Dallas Cowboys, that Jerry Jones has coveted Sean Payton for some time. I know, of course, Mike McCarthy's seat was feeling a little bit warm after the end of the season. I'm not saying, of course, that Mike McCarthy's on his way out right now just because Sean Payton is retiring. But if you look at this a year from now, maybe Sean Payton's in the booth for a year. And maybe he likes it, gets a taste of it, but he misses football. He misses the locker room. He misses being a head coach. And the right job opens up, like perhaps one located in Dallas, that maybe that's something that happens. It's hard to tell the future. Of course, we don't have a crystal ball, but is that a possible scenario among the many scenarios that are out there in the future? Absolutely.
Oh, okay, JJ, I have two more questions. I'm going to skip one of them. I'm going to go to the other. So let's take a look at the Saints now. They are now one of many teams looking for a new head coach. Where do they start to turn?
Well, you have to figure out who your quarterback is going to be and what you want your team to be. What is going to be their identity? Is this going to be a defensive-led team, which we've sort of seen the last couple of years? Do you want to try to find a clone of Sean Payton? You know, you start looking out there. Do you want to bring in a Brian Flores, for example? You know, Sean Payton is making this move right now because he also doesn't want to put the Saints behind the eight ball, right? He doesn't want to retire 2 weeks from now when all the great coaches are snapped up. So we're still waiting on head coaches to be hired around the league. And once those dominoes fall, Amanda, they're going to fall very, very quickly. Now, once, let's say, Brian Daboll is signed as the New York Giants head coach, I think that we're going to see in quick succession a number of these sort of opportunities gobbled up. And so the Saints right now, how are they positioned? Well, they appear to be in salary cap hell. They're way over the cap like they always are around now. But Mickey Loomis always finds a way and can, with several restructures, get under the cap pretty comfortably and pretty easily. So it doesn't look that way. I tell you what, if as I mentioned earlier, if Tampa Bay doesn't have Tom Brady at quarterback in the 2022 season and beyond, if he decides to retire, look at the NFC South. The Panthers aren't competitive right now. The Atlanta Falcons were competitive in a number of games, and then half the games they got blown out. But this is a winnable division, no question about it. You just have to figure out who your quarterback is going to be and if it is going to be Jameis Winston. Right now, of course, it's difficult to foresee who exactly the New Orleans Saints would target there at the head coaching position, but because Sean Payton has informed them of his retirement at this point, before any other coaches have inked with another team, that puts them in a position to get into the sweepstakes for some of these top guys.
With all of these head coaching vacancies, we talk about the attractiveness of the jobs there. You talked about being in Chicago, and you're kind of a king there in Chicago when you take that job. I mean, the same could be said for New Orleans. I mean, they adore Sean Payton and that Saints team. Those fans are as faithful as anything you will see across the league. How attractive, given the questions at quarterback, about $71 million over the salary cap, how attractive is this job for someone?
I think it is attractive. Every time that this comes up, obviously there are pros and there are cons, right? And I think the biggest con here is like anytime you're following a legend. You're following a legend. You will always be compared to Sean Payton. And those comparisons will be there on day one. They will be there after the end of your 17th game. If you're fortunate enough to make it into the playoffs, they will be there. Unless you win a Super Bowl in year one, you're going to constantly be compared to Sean Payton, and very likely in a negative way or in a way that you don't like. So that's the biggest con. But this is a team, again, they have a fantastic defense. They have an offensive line that has depth. They have a number of options at quarterback. Obviously, Taysom Hill, whom Sean Payton unlocked Taysom Hill. Well, the next coach liked Taysom Hill as much as Sean Payton. I don't know who else likes Taysom Hill as much as Sean Payton. Do they want to stick with Jameis Winston through that ACL rehab? You have Alvin Kamara. Again, you're in a division that if Tom Brady retires, you can absolutely go out there and win this division in 2022. You have a strong and faithful crowd. You have a dome. New Orleans is a great place to be and live. So there are a number of great things about this opportunity. You know, off the top of my head, as we think about the 8 or 9 coaching vacancies around the league, I'd have to say that this shoots up very much to the top of the list. 1, maybe 2. I know some folks believe in Denver. They don't have a quarterback. I know that some folks like the Minnesota Vikings. I do. I'd put this right there with the Vikings as the top job open up in the NFL.
Jonathan Jones, we appreciate it. Of course, the big news breaking this afternoon that Sean Payton is stepping away from the Saints. We have much more on this coming up from our Jason LaConfora right now, saying that Sean Payton is stepping aside. He is not retiring per se, but taking a break from coaching. We'll continue to follow this breaking news. We'll have much more on the other side of the break.
Let's get Pete Prisco in here. Pete, your reaction to Sean Payton stepping away for now?
Well, there had been rumblings about it, and this was a trying season for Sean Payton in every way, shape, or form. I mean, you started out with the hurricane stuff, you had all the injuries, you have the cap situation, you have the COVID situation, and they didn't play like he expected them to play. I remember he told me in the summer he thought this team, he really liked this team. This was a team he thought could make a playoff push, but with all the injuries and all the COVID situation, it kind of got derailed. So, look, Sean recently was married I think it was a year ago. Maybe he's going to spend time with the family, but I think he's going to coach somewhere else. That's just my gut feeling. I think this is a situation where he looked at the cap room in New Orleans, and it is a mess. There's 70-something million over the cap next year, and you look at the contracts, it's hard to get out of some of those contracts because there is so much dead money that would accelerate into the cap. So it's a real mess. They're going to be challenged like they've never been challenged before, and they've been challenged. Believe me, they've had cap issues before. But I think this might be a ploy for him to go somewhere else. Maybe Dallas, if they were to make a change. Maybe Miami. Maybe it doesn't happen this year. Maybe he sits out for a year and he comes back.
And what would the logistics of a team wanting him to coach there, what would those logistics be, and what would that compensation need to look like, in your opinion?
Well, I think it would need to be a first-round pick, maybe a couple picks. I mean, we've seen the history play out, how that's worked out in some situations. But remember, Bruce Arians walked away when he was with the Arizona Cardinals, and when he went to Tampa Bay, they worked out a compensation for like a 6th-round pick because they didn't want him. I think they swapped the 6 and the 7. They didn't want him coming back. They had already filled the job. So it just depends on how that plays out. But I would imagine if Sean Payton wanted to coach this year, I think it would be a first-round pick and something else to get him. And, you know, you have to sit there and say what team is willing to do that, what team is willing to give up the draft pick compensation to go get him. And he's one of the best coaches in the league. He's one of the best play callers I think this league has ever seen. That's how good he's been calling plays. So he would be worth it for a team. I generally would say don't give away first-round picks. But if you could get him for a late 1, mid 1, then maybe you go do that if you're the Miami Dolphins or another team.
Yeah, you mentioned the Dallas Cowboys, who don't have an opening as of now, but there are people beating that drum to try to replace Mike McCarthy because of how things ended there in Dallas. What would be the best fit, in your opinion, for Sean Payton if he were to coach somewhere else?
Oh, I think Dallas would be a great fit for him. I think, having a ready-made offense with Dak Prescott and those receivers and that offensive line in the running game would be perfect for him. He would be a great addition to that team. He's a great play caller. I think he'd really amp up the offense. Now, Kellen Moore's done some good things with the offense, but Sean Payton, like I said earlier, one of the best who's ever called plays, and he would be great for Dak Prescott and that offense. I think Dallas would be ideal. Hey, you know what? Miami, you sit there and you say, what about the Dolphins? But can he get to play to a higher level? That's to be determined if he were to get the job. I think it'd be a real challenge for him, and I know Sean likes challenges. He's one of those guys that loves to be presented with challenges. That's why he liked this team this year. Nobody thought they'd be any good, and here they were at one point pushing for a playoff berth before all the injuries and all the COVID situations.
We should hear from the New Orleans Saints and Sean Payton at some point today. There is a reported press conference that's going to happen at some point. Where do the Saints go from here, losing the greatest coach in franchise history, losing the greatest quarterback in franchise history 1 year ago, and still not really having a clue what they're going to do at the quarterback position?
You're right. And again, I go back to the cap situation. I mean, it's a mess. I mean, across the board, it is a mess. Mickey Loomis, the general manager, is going to be challenged like he's never been challenged before to get this right. As far as a coach, look, there's one in the building, Dennis Allen. He's done a great job with that defense, and I think the players respect him. And he's been a head coach before. He might be, the first guy that you talk to in terms of getting that job. If you wanted to go from an offensive standpoint, I think you have to look outside the building. Although Pete Carmichael's been around there for a long time calling plays as the offensive coordinator. I don't think he would be the head coach, but I do think Dennis Allen would get strong consideration.
Pete, you're about to cover, your 32nd consecutive Super Bowl. You covered the one Super Bowl the Saints appeared in and won. Take us back to the pre-Sean Payton days, because this younger generation, I mean, if you're in your 20s, you don't know the Saints as the horrific franchise that they were for so long.
Yeah, but you know what? They had some decent years there. Back in the day when they had the great defense with Jim Mora and Bobby Hebert was the quarterback. They had this pass rush with this Pat Swilling and Ricky Jackson and Sam Mills and Vaughn Johnson, the linebackers. They were outstanding in that situation. So they had some good years, but then it went lean. And what happens is when you don't have a quarterback, and there were always questions about Aaron Brooks. He'd flash and have moments, but then he'd disappear. Even they went to the playoffs. So it was never as bad as way back in the day, but they didn't have any kind of success like you had when you had Drew Brees and Sean Payton. And by the way, the lesson to be learned, get the quarterback, because the quarterback will make all coaches look good.
Yeah, didn't have a quarterback this season, but Sean Payton still was able to beat on the door of the playoffs, 9-8, another winning record for Sean Payton in what might be his last season with the Saints. At least his last season for now. Pete Prisco with us on HQ as Sean Payton decides to step away from coaching the New Orleans Saints with 3 years remaining on his contract. Bryant McFadden, who hinted that this might be coming a little over a week ago, will join us next. Our Jason Lockett-Four reporting that Sean Payton is stepping aside from the Saints, not retiring at this point, but taking a break from coaching. Going to be a lot of teams who would love to have him as a coach, but they would have to give the Saints some compensation, likely draft compensation, and maybe even a first-round pick if they want him to coach this season. He's under contract for another 3 years. There are also networks very interested in Sean Payton's services as an analyst as well, so he is going to be a hot commodity, but stepping aside for now. Bryant McFadden was on with us about 8 days ago. We were talking about the Bears head coaching vacancy, and he looked into the future.
A name that's one of the more respected coaches in the National Football League, a guy who has won a championship, one of the best play callers in the game. The best ideal fit for the Chicago Bears is Sean Payton. Yes, Sean Payton, currently the New Orleans Saints head coach. Sean Payton. I believe, I don't know what my gut is telling me, Amanda, I feel like Sean Payton will not coach the New Orleans Saints in 2022. I could be wrong, I could be right, but my gut is telling me I think Sean Payton will be coaching elsewhere this upcoming season.
That was BMAC talking with our Amanda Guerra, and BMAC, I guess your gut does not lie. What was your gut whispering to you, and how did this come to fruition? That was 8 days ago, before we heard a lot of other national reporters say that this was a possibility.
Well, my gut was telling me at that time, Chris, that Sean Payton in New Orleans was pretty much over. We've heard rumors speculating with Sean Payton. Sean Payton, will he remain the head coach for the New Orleans Saints in years past, right? We've heard this it seems like almost every offseason we hear this regarding Sean Payton and New Orleans Saints as the head coach for the Saints. But this year, it felt a little different. And the reason why is because the structure wasn't in place like we've seen in years past. You know, the quarterback, Drew Brees, long gone. You lost your starting quarterback in Jameis Winston. Then you were kind of just playing musical chairs at the quarterback position. Sean Payton is an outstanding play caller, but he's a better play caller when he has a reliable guy at the quarterback position. And currently in New Orleans, they don't have that. They don't have that. So I felt like this would probably be the ideal time to cut ties from that said organization. And granted, that's a tough thing to do for Sean Payton because he's been with the Saints through thick and thin. When you look at the Katrina tragedy that happened years ago in 2005, 2006, leading into 2005 season, he rallied the city, brought energy to the city. You know what I mean? Made the Saints a reliable, competitive franchise, consistent, tough-minded, and now cutting ties. This is a huge blow to the New Orleans Saints organization and franchise. And I'm kind of disappointed that I was a little bit right because I feel like Sean Payton and New Orleans Saints should have been tied to the hip as long as possible, but currently it won't be that way going forward.
Was the head coach there since 2006. BMAC brought the franchise their only Super Bowl championship, won 63% of his games. You originally brought this up 8 days ago because we were talking about the best fits for the Chicago Bears, and that's when you brought up Sean Payton. Are the Bears his best fit, in your opinion, if he coaches elsewhere?
You know what? I believe Sean Payton is the coach. All the vacant options that are open right now, he would be the best fit because he is that type of mind when it comes to football. But we also have to understand and look at this situation, you know, with open eyes. Understanding and knowing who his mentor is, Chris. It's Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells and Sean Payton, they're tied to the hip. He looks up to Bill Parcells. If you look at what Bill Parcells did in his coaching career at one point in time, removing himself from an organization just to be able to go to another organization, I foresee the same thing potentially happening with Sean Payton. So basically, what we're seeing today is Sean Payton removing himself from the New Orleans Saints, but he already has a team in mind that he plans on coaching, that he would like to coach. You don't make this move out of nowhere unless you already have a quality option waiting for you. And Sean Payton is that guy, me personally. So there's not a fit that's not good for Sean Payton. It's all about what he wants to do, where he wants to coach. And I believe, Chris, he already knows exactly where he wants to coach and who's going with him. That's what my gut is telling me.
Does that mean, yeah, we're gonna have to listen to your gut this time because you were right last week. Does that mean you think he's going to coach this upcoming season, next season, the 2022 season?
It's 50-50. As you stated with Pete Prisco, an organization will have to give up some type of draft capital to get Sean Payton, right? And looking at the open jobs right now, the teams that have the most to give definitely will be a quality suitor to get Sean Payton. So I'll tell you this much, Chris. Let me listen to my gut once again. There's 50-50, there's a 50-50 chance he will coach, right, this season. It's all about the draft capital and what the New Orleans Saints can get in return. But I'll tell you this for sure. Sean Payton is not walking away to never coach again. He will coach again. The biggest question is, will it be in 2022? But like I said, Chris, the move that we saw happen today, there's another move following that move. And you don't remove yourself from a sound structured situation unless you believe you have something better waiting for you. 3 years, $45 million is what he's walking away from. All the say-so over the organization, all the personnel decisions is going through him. If he walks away from this situation, that situation he had in New Orleans, he believes he has something better waiting for him, and eventually he will be able to show us all what that situation is. So my gut is telling me he may coach this year, he might not coach this year, but he already knows where he's going to coach when that time comes. You better believe it. And can I say something to you? I think it may be a team in the AFC.
You sound like a guy who actually knows what's good. Like your gut, I feel like your gut might actually know exactly where he's going. So an AFC team, all right, wheels are turning here. B-Mac, you've got so much, you didn't play for him, right? I mean, you played Pittsburgh in Arizona. You didn't play for Sean Payton, but I can tell you have so much respect for him. And we all know he's a great coach and he's widely respected. Why do you think, what has made him such a great coach in the NFL, and why do you think eventually he might end up in the Hall of Fame?
He's a player's coach. He's relatable to players, not just on the offensive end, but the defensive end as well. And I love his personality, just watching him as an opposing player, watching him as a fan of the game right now. He's an aggressive guy, you know what I mean? And his team, they have the same image that he has. When you watch them play with the energy, how physical they are. Think about this, we've seen oftentimes Sean Payton talking trash to opposing players. Most coaches don't do that. They stay in a shell. They don't get all the way involved. He's emotionally involved, cursing out opposing players, cursing out referees. We love that as players. He's authentic. Some guys, when they become a new head coach, they change who they are as an individual. Most players don't like that. Be who you are. Be who you was before you became the face of the franchise. And that's why we've seen so much success tied to Sean Payton. And I, for one, would love to see him continue to coach in the National Football League. That's good for the game. It's good for the sport because he's authentic and he does it his way. He does it his way. So I understand people saying he has TV deals waiting on him. No, Sean, stop that. Your personality, your character, it's not deserving to be in a studio. You can't get involved in the game like he does. Stay on the sideline. Stay on the sideline and keep cursing out opposing players who come at you the wrong way. We love that. That's what players love. So that's why I respect him. Number one, he has the numbers that commands respect. But you see how he goes about his job every day, and he does it the right way. And he's all about winning. So you have to respect that. Even if you're a rival of the New Orleans Saints or Sean Payton, at the end of the day, you respect greatness. And that's who he is as a coach.
That's Bryant McFadden, two-time Super Bowl champion. Ton of respect for Sean Payton, and he's got his ear to his gut. Last week his gut said Sean Payton's not going to coach the Saints anymore. This week his gut says he's going to coach somewhere else very soon, and he thinks it'll be in the AFC, not the NFC. Bryant, thank you so much for the time here on HQ. Inside the NFL is coming up tonight, 9:30 Eastern Time, streaming exclusively on Paramount+.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.